Hey guys, it's Matthew here. It's been a very long time since I've made a video, so I figured I would make one real quick. And I just wanted to do a quick video, basically the dirty truth, if you will, about communist and or Eastern Bloc cars and how it can help you. So a little something I didn't realize, and when you start getting into this, especially as a Westerner, this channel is dedicated, I guess, mostly towards Western viewers. All these European or Eastern European car brands, I should say, you haven't heard any of them. It sounds like a foreign thing. What's Vaz? What's Zaz? Uaz? The Polskis, Trabant, which Polski is a brand of car. Fiat Polski. Yugos, Zastava. You can keep on going on. There's a ton of them. All these new car brands, it seems a little overwhelming sometimes. And I will say it's not as bad as it seems. And the dirty little truth, and I'll just say it in the beginning of the video, all of these cars are rip-offs. They're all cheap rip-offs of usually Western cars. So what happened during the Soviet Union, and it kind of makes sense, like think about China nowadays. Like they make cheap stuff, but they wait for something to get released, and then they make like a cheap knockoff of it and sell it really cheap, and that's why most cheap stuff's Chinese. That's just sort of the way communist governments or socialist governments, I guess, worked back in the day and even now. And a lot of these cars were just the same thing of that. They're cheap knockoffs. So, and I have a couple sources here. So Fiat Polski, obviously, this was Fiat in Poland. And a lot of cars in Poland were basically just crappier, downgraded Fiats. The Yugo, for example, which you think, oh, Yugo is a whole different, it's not its own separate thing. All it is a knocked off, and I think right here, the short-end variant of the Fiat 128. And actually, one thing I will definitely say, if you know a lot about Fiat cars, especially like 70s, 80s, even Soviet cars, a lot of the Ladas, for example, are basically just rip-offs of Fiats. And what I mean by that is when Fiat's done making a car, in the 70s, 80s, back in the day, 10, 20 years has passed, they don't need the tooling for anything, they would sell them to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union would take that, make their own cars, shove their own badge on it, so now you have a Lada Zhiguli or whatever it may be, and that's the Lada Zhiguli. And a lot of Soviet cars, for some odd reason, are based off of Fiat. So if you have a good working knowledge of Fiats, like a 1980 Soviet car is like a 1970 or 1965 Fiat, and Skodas have similar thing. Pretty much every single Eastern Bloc car is this way. It's basically just a rip-off of a Western car. There's really not many original, if any original. I think the Lada Niva might be one of the few ones that is somewhat original. But almost every single car from that part of the world is basically a rip-off of a Western car. So what that means and what that can help you, number one, with parts, a lot of these parts are interchangeable with their Western counterparts. For example, when I bought a Yugo, I ordered, it didn't come with one of the windshields, one of the mirrors, I'm sorry. It didn't come with the driver's side mirror, and obviously I needed a driver's side mirror. So what did I do? I ordered one, and sure enough, when it came in, the packaging for the mirror said Fiat everything. And sure enough, all it was a repackaged original Fiat part marketed for the Yugo. And most of these cars are that way. So getting parts is actually not as difficult as you may think it will be. The flip side of that, I'll say the caveat of all this, like I said, these are like not as good. They're cheaper knockoff versions of these cars. Obviously, the Eastern European car is probably not going to have the same build quality as the Western European counterpart of that. So what that means, and a good example of this would be Uaz, which obviously I've made a couple of videos about on my channel already. The Uaz is a rip-off of a World War II military Jeep, if you will. And actually, if you look at like 1950s Jeeps, for example, I needed a brake drum for my Uaz, and I looked at the dimensions. It's the same dimension as like a 1952 Jeep truck or something like that, like dead on. So a lot of the parts on the Uaz themselves, obviously the big difference being metric threads versus standard threads, but are just Jeep parts. And even the service manual that I use to work on it is a World War II military Jeep manual, and this thing is dead on. I recommend, if you're going to get a Buhanka in the States, this thing's pretty much dead on knowledge-wise. When I was doing my brakes, everything was like the exact same. Has this manual, and again, it's in perfect English, and there's even videos available. If you look up like how to do rear brakes on World War II military Jeep, it's going to be the exact same as your UAZ. So the knowledge is there. You don't necessarily need to speak Russian or go through that endeavor, and trust me, it's very difficult. When I have my actual UAZ manual here, I can read some of it, but there's obviously things are different, and I'm not used to reading liters, and things are in metric, and it's a lot easier to use the Jeep one. Granted, I still have this one. So getting parts is easier. Maintenance-wise, it's easier than you think. And I'm trying to think of really any exception. Maybe the Trabant might be another exception. I really doubt there is anything that garbage and or unique, I should say, in Western Europe at the time. And when I was getting my starter went out, actually, and I was able to cross-reference the part, it was the same part as a Mitsubishi in my Buhanka. They basically just ripped off the same starter gear, and I bought a little kit for it from like AutoZone or something, and it went in there perfectly, and it had like a little like gasket cover set or whatever, all that fit, everything in that kit fit perfectly in my Russian-made starter, because it was basically just an exact rip-off of the Mitsubishi. So what I want to do, and I haven't had time to, maybe on my blog or somewhere, I would like to have a cross-reference guide, if that makes sense. So if you need a part for your Eastern Bloc vehicle, if you will, you can figure out what the Western counterpart is to save you from, especially nowadays, and I already made a separate video on this, importing cars for your Buhanka or UAZ Eastern Bloc vehicle, some of the sites I use. I might make a part 2. I got a pretty couple of emails with some additional sites as well. But with sanctions, it is very difficult for a lot of these vehicles, and you might be able to find those parts at your local parts store, just because they're kind of cheap rip-offs. And before I rattle off too much, an example, though getting the Western parts might even be better, I had a lot of issues. I had to redo my front brakes, which in the Buhanka, I might make a video on that. I had front drums. And what happened is, one of them got stuck, and I couldn't spin it all. And of course, it's like, I just changed the wheel cylinders. It has all new parts in there, new springs. Like, what's going on? I cannot figure this out for the life of me. And it turns out that one of my brand new wheel cylinders, just bought it from Poland, but just put it in, a legitimate UAZ part. I had all the Russian writing and everything on the box. It got stuck open after using it like 2 or 3 times. It was just a bad new part. And that's something I was warned about before I bought my Buhanka, and it's something you need to be aware about, is that even some of these parts, you're going to have defects. They're not all going to be perfect. Alex, the guy from Kyrgyzstan that I mentioned in my importing a Buhanka video, was telling me this, that he's had issues with brand new Buhankas, with brand new parts. It's a normal thing. And getting the Western part, you might get better quality, and you might avoid that. So not only do you not have to worry about shipping, I don't want to say getting around sanctions, but trying to navigate sanctions, if you will, and everything that comes with that, and just the ease of going to a local parts store, but you might be getting a better part on top of that, where you don't have to deal with some of these secondhand, not as well-made rip-off parts. You might just be able to use, maybe I could have just got a Jeep wheel cylinder at my local parts store, not had to wait 2 weeks for shipping, not have to pay shipping, and it might have fit in there perfectly. I don't know. Like I said, the thread sizes are different. I don't know if that would have made a big deal or not. But it's definitely something to look into. I might make a future video on this just because I think it's very important. As far as I know, UAZ and GAZ are pretty much based more off of Jeep type. Again, I might make do some more deep research, another video kind of cross-referencing what's based off of what, because there's not too much originality. But yeah, that's pretty much the video. Thanks for watching. I just wanted to rattle off what's kind of going up in my head right now, and hopefully it helps one of you out. So, thanks.